A boy's soulful violin melody fills a packed subway station. But a vicious bully is about to make the biggest mistake of his life, because he has no idea who's watching him from the shadows. The air in the Times Square subway station was a thick cocktail of humanity, a mix of hurried footsteps, distant train screeches, and the faint, greasy scent of streetcar pretzels. It was a chaotic symphony of a city that never slept, a place where most people wore invisible armor, their eyes fixed forward, their minds already at their destination. Yet, cutting through the discord was a sound so pure and unexpected it made people pause. It was the clear, soaring melody of a violin. Standing near a tiled pillar, a small boy named Leo, no older than 12, played with a concentration that belied his years. His eyes were closed, his small frame swaying gently with the rhythm, his fingers moving with practiced grace over the fingerboard. His violin, a modest instrument with a warm, amber finish, looked almost fragile amidst the station's grit and steel. Propped open at his feet was its worn, black case, a small, hand-drawn sign leaning against it, "Help save our school music program." A sparse collection of dollar bills and loose change lay inside. Further back, half swallowed by the shadows of a recessed alcove, a man watched. He was built like a mountain, broad and solid, a simple gray hoodie pulled over his head, dark sunglasses obscuring his famous face. To the rushing commuters, he was just another anonymous figure. But he was anything but. This was Mike Tyson, and his gaze was fixed on his grandson with an unreadable mixture of immense pride and quiet vigilance. He had taught Leo that discipline was the bridge between goals and accomplishment, whether in a boxing ring or on a concert stage. Seeing the boy stand here, brave and focused, filled a part of his heart he rarely showed the world. The music swelled, a bittersweet piece that seemed to speak of both hope and struggle. A woman in a business suit slowed her pace, a faint smile touching her lips before she dropped a $5 bill into the case. An old man leaned on his cane, tapping his foot softly in time. For a few fleeting minutes, Leo's music had carved out a small sanctuary of peace in the heart of the urban beast. Then, the sanctuary was breached. A sudden blast of hip-hop music from a powerful boombox shattered the fragile harmony. The crowd instinctively parted as a crew of 5 street dancers pushed their way into the open space, their movements aggressive and proprietary. They were a riot of color and noise, their faces set in masks of bored arrogance. At their center was their leader, a lanky young man in a neon green jacket whose smirk seemed permanently etched onto his face. He went by Spike, and he surveyed the area as if he owned it. His eyes landed on Leo, and the smirk widened into a predatory grin. The storm had arrived. Spike swaggered towards Leo, his crew fanning out behind him like a pack of hyenas. The boombox, now placed on the floor, pulsed a heavy, distorted beat that warred with the lingering notes of the violin. Leo had opened his eyes, his playing faltering for a moment as he registered the intrusion. Well, what do we have here?" Spike's voice was laced with a mocking drawl, loud enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. "A little concert. You think anyone wants to hear that sad little screeching, kid?" He gestured dismissively at the violin. Leo clutched the neck of his instrument, his knuckles turning white. He didn't answer, his gaze dropping to the floor. He just wanted to be invisible. In the shadows, Mike Tyson's jaw tightened. A familiar, hot surge of anger, an impulse he'd spent decades learning to control, rose in his chest. He had promised Leo he'd stay back, that this was the boy's own challenge to build character. But his hands, resting in his hoodie pocket, curled into fists. He watched the crowd. People were already turning away, burying their faces in their phones, their expressions a mixture of annoyance and fear. No one was going to help. They were all prisoners of the bystander effect. "Cat got your tongue?" Spike taunted, stepping closer. One of his crew, a stocky kid with a backwards baseball cap, laughed. "This is our spot, man. We film our routines here. Get your little charity case out of the way." "I'm not in anyone's way," Leo finally mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll be done soon." This quiet defiance seemed to infuriate Spike more than any argument could have. "You'll be done when I say you're done," he snapped. He nodded at the stocky crew member, a kid named Jax. With a theatrical shrug, Jax stepped forward and deliberately kicked the open violin case. The case flipped over, scattering the coins and crumpled bills across the grimy floor. The metallic clatter of the coins echoed for a moment, a sound of profound disrespect that made several onlookers flinch. "Oops," Jack said, a stupid grin spreading across his face. "Clumsy me." Leo stared at the scattered money, his lower lip trembling. The donations represented a week of standing in crowded, noisy stations, a week of fighting his shyness to play for strangers. Tyson took a half-step forward, his entire body tensing like a compressed spring. He saw his grandson's shoulders slump. For a second, he thought the boy would break. But then, Leo straightened up, lifted his chin, and looked Spike directly in the eye. "Pick it up," Leo said. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was quiet, but it was as solid as the concrete pillars around them. Spike blinked, taken aback by the boy's sudden backbone. He then let out a sharp, ugly laugh. "You got some nerve, kid. I'll give you that." He leaned in, his face inches from Leo's. "But nerve doesn't mean anything down here. Now pack up your broken toy and get lost before you really piss me off." "I'm not leaving," Leo repeated, his grip on his violin now a protective embrace. "I have just as much right to be here as you do." That was it. The final challenge to Spike's fragile ego. The humor vanished from his face, replaced by a cold fury. "You know what? You're right," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing hiss. "You have a right to be here. But this," he reached out and snatched the violin from Leo's hands with shocking speed. "This piece of junk doesn't." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers who were still watching. Leo reached out instinctively, a strangled "no" escaping his lips. Spike held the violin up, examining it with mock curiosity. "So precious," he sneered, turning it over in his hands. He looked at Leo, at the crowd, at his crew, soaking in the attention. This was his stage now. He was the star. Then, with a final, contemptuous look at Leo, he lifted the instrument high over his head and brought it down with sickening force against the edge of a steel trash can. The sound was a horrifying crack of splintering wood and the sharp, discordant twang of snapping strings. It was a sound of violence, of something beautiful and cherished being irrevocably destroyed. Tiny fragments of polished amber wood skittered across the floor. The violin's body was shattered, its neck hanging at a grotesque angle. A profound, stunned silence fell over the station, broken only by the distant rumble of an approaching train. Leo stared at the wreckage of his violin, his face a mask of pale shock. He didn't cry. He just stood there, his small body trembling, his breath caught in his throat. Spike tossed the broken remains to the floor. "There," he said, a triumphant sneer on his face. "Now it's just you." He raised his hand and took a step forward, intending to shove the boy out of his way. He never completed the motion. A hand, seemingly appearing from nowhere, clamped down on his wrist. It wasn't a grab, it was an anchor. It felt like a block of granite, impossibly strong and unyielding. Spike's head whipped to the side, his eyes wide with surprise and pain. He found himself staring into the cold, flat gaze of the man from the shadows. The sunglasses were off. And the entire world recognized that face. A whisper shot through the crowd like an electric current. "Oh my God. That's Mike Tyson." Spike stared, his mind struggling to process the impossible reality. "Who the hell are you, old man?" he snarled, trying to wrench his wrist free. The grip only tightened, and a flicker of genuine fear crossed his face. "Let go of me." Tyson's expression didn't change. His voice, when he spoke, was low, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the station's noise with absolute authority. "You put your hands on my grandson." It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. The word grandson hung in the air, reframing the entire event. This wasn't a random celebrity encounter. This was personal. Spike's bravado, fueled by an audience and the perceived weakness of his victim, crumbled into dust. He looked at his crew for support, but they were frozen, their jaws slack, their eyes wide with a dawning horror. They weren't looking at an old man in a hoodie anymore, they were looking at a legend, an icon of raw, untamable power. I didn't know, Spike stammered, his confidence evaporating. You knew he was a child, Tyson said, his voice still unnervingly calm. You knew you were stronger. And you chose to be cruel. That's all I need to know. He released Spike's wrist with a flick, as if discarding a piece of trash. The first crew member, Jax, thinking he could score points, made a fatal miscalculation. He lunged forward with a clumsy shove. Tyson didn't even seem to move. There was a subtle pivot of his hips, a shift of weight, and he simply redirected Jax's momentum. The boy stumbled past him, crashing into the boombox and collapsing in a heap with his own music. Another dancer, a wiry kid, swung a wild haymaker. Tyson ducked under the punch with an economy of motion that was almost poetic. As he came up, he delivered a short, powerful jab to the dancer's solar plexus. There was no sound, just a soft thud. The kid's eyes bulged, the air left his lungs in a silent whoosh, and he folded, gasping for breath. It wasn't a knockout blow, it was a disabling one, precise and terrifyingly efficient. The remaining two dancers backed away, their hands raised in surrender, wanting no part of the silent storm that had just been unleashed. Now only Spike remained. His face was pale, his sneer replaced with sheer terror. He took a half step back, then another. Tyson took one step forward, closing the distance. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't need to. His presence alone was a weapon. You're a coward, Tyson said, his voice devoid of heat, stating it as a simple fact. You prey on the weak because you're terrified of the strong. Now get out of my sight. Spike didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled to help his winded friend, and together, the crew practically fell over each other in their haste to flee. They grabbed their boombox and disappeared into the nearest tunnel, their hurried footsteps echoing their humiliation. For a beat, the station was dead silent. Then, one person started clapping. Another joined in, and then another, until the entire platform erupted in a wave of thunderous applause and relieved cheers. The fear that had gripped the crowd was gone, replaced by a surge of awe and catharsis. The silent thunder had passed, leaving a field of cleared air in its wake. Mike Tyson ignored the applause. His attention was solely on one person. He walked over to Leo, his movements now gentle, his expression softening as he knelt down to his grandson's level. The fierce protector melted away, replaced by the loving grandfather. You okay, champ? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Leo, who had stood strong through the taunts and the destruction, finally let the tears come. He threw his arms around his grandfather's neck and sobbed, not from fear, but from the overwhelming release of tension and gratitude. Tyson held him tight, murmuring words of comfort only he could hear. As they embraced, the crowd began to move with a new purpose. A young woman with her phone still held up approached them tentatively. I got it all, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. The whole thing. It's already going viral. Tyson looked up at her and gave a slight shake of his head. Focus on him, he said, gesturing to Leo. He's the one who was brave. From the back of the crowd, an elderly man with kind eyes and a tweed coat pushed forward. He was holding a sleek, new violin case. I own a small music shop just a few blocks from here, he explained, his voice rich with a European accent. I was on my way to a repair job. I saw what happened. I saw this boy's courage. He held the case out to Leo. No child who loves music this much should be without an instrument. Please. This is for you. The crowd murmured in approval. Leo, his tears slowing, looked from the man to his grandfather, who gave him a reassuring nod. With trembling hands, Leo accepted the case. He laid it flat, unlatched it, and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in a bed of deep blue velvet, was a stunning new violin, its wood gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. A collective breath was drawn. Leo lifted the instrument as if it were made of glass, his fingers tracing its perfect, unblemished surface. The man handed him a bow. After a moment, Leo tucked the violin under his chin, raised the bow, and drew it across the strings. A single, perfect note rang out, clear, rich, and full of a strength that the old violin never possessed. It silenced the station once more. Then, Leo began to play. The melody was the same one he had started with, but now it was transformed. It was filled with pain, resilience, and an overwhelming sense of hope. It was a song of survival. People surged forward, not just with their phones out, but with their wallets. The scattered coins and bills were gathered, and then more was added. 5s, 10s, 20s were tucked into the new violin case until it overflowed. It was no longer just a donation, it was an investment in the boy's spirit. Tyson stepped back, melting into the edge of the crowd, allowing the moment to belong to Leo and the community that was now forming around him. The echo of hope was already starting to drown out the memory of hate. The story of the Times Square violinist and his legendary grandfather exploded across the internet. The video was everywhere, shared on news sites, social media feeds, and celebrity blogs. But the impact went far beyond viral fame. The link to the school's music program fundraiser, shared by thousands, received an avalanche of donations, exceeding its goal tenfold in less than 24 hours. The story became a modern fable for New York City, a testament to the fact that even in a place of millions of strangers, courage could spark a chain reaction of kindness. The next evening, Leo and his grandfather sat on a park bench, far from the chaos of the subway. The new violin rested safely in its case beside them. "You know," Tyson said, looking out at the setting sun, "the hardest fight is never in the ring. It's in here." He tapped his own chest. "It's the choice to stand up when you're scared. To not let them make you small. You did that yesterday, Leo. Before I ever stepped in, you won the fight." Leo looked at the hands that had once brought down giants, now resting peacefully on his grandfather's knee. "I was so scared, Grandpa." "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Tyson replied, his voice a low rumble. "It means you do it anyway. You stood your ground for what you believed in. That's a champion's heart. I'm more proud of you for that than for any belt I ever won." He gave Leo a one-armed hug, a quiet moment of understanding passing between the boy and the legend. The world saw Mike Tyson, the fighter. But Leo saw his grandpa, the man who had taught him that true strength was about protecting what you love. Some moments echo far beyond a subway platform, reminding us of the power we all hold. The power to be a bystander, or the power to be a protector. What would you have done if you were in that crowd, before Tyson stepped in? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, so please, always comment with respect. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in the power of standing up for what's right.